this truly flaming June evening as George Osborne, the Tory Chancellor, has turned up the heat on the public sector workforce and all those who rely on the services public sector workers deliver. During the course of the afternoon, you may well have seen or heard news reports about the content of the so-called emergency budget. In our view, in Camden UNISON, it's nothing less than a declaration of war on our members and the people who rely on the services they provide. The vast majority of Camden employees are faced with a 2-year pay freeze. That amounts to a substantial cut in real pay at a time when the retail price index, the most reliable measure of inflation, stands at more than 5%. And even for the lowest paid, who will get a meagre £250 increase a year, it will amount to less than 2% at best on their current poverty pay. In addition, thousands of local authority jobs are clearly going to be at risk in this borough. There is no prospect for the local authority generating any additional revenue through a hike in council tax. Not a tax that UNISON supports particularly, but yet again, central government under the Camden coalition is tightening the noose around local authorities. Education, and we'll hear more about this later, faces over the next 4 years a real cut of 25%. That is going to mean job losses in schools, amongst support staff, amongst teachers, and it is also going to mean a pay freeze for those who work across primary and secondary education. In addition, we are looking at a cap on housing benefit of £250 per week for single-bedroom accommodation and £400 a week for 3-bedroom and larger houses. In a borough like Camden, and indeed across inner London, that means making private rented accommodation a no-go area for thousands of people. Increasingly, only the richest of the rich are going to be able to afford private sector housing at a time when the outlook for social housing could not possibly be bleaker. We're also looking at a cap over the next 3 years on child benefits and other welfare and tax credit changes that will supposedly yield £11 billion in savings to the Treasury. Meanwhile, the government is boasting that the rich will feel the pain and somehow the banks will be punished for their profligacy. Well, the reality is that it's a £2 billion a year levy, 1/15 of the revenue that could be generated through the modest so-called Robin Hood tax. And you compare that £2 billion a year figure to the £1 trillion plus that the bankers got from ordinary working-class taxpayers in this country to rescue the financial system in 2008 and 2009, and it doesn't even pale in comparison. Corporation tax in Britain, amongst the lowest in the Western world already, is going to go down year on year by 4 percentage points over the next 4 years, from 28 to 24%. And for many of us, the biggest sting in the tail comes just after Christmas and New Year's Day, with the imposition of a 2.5 percentage point increase in VAT. Value-added tax will go up to 20%. This is the most regressive form of taxation. For the top 10% of earners in this country, only £1 in every 25 goes to VAT. For the poorest 10%, it's £1 in every 7. So 3.5 times the burden on the poorest people in this country arising from VAT, VAT going up by 2.5 percentage points from the 1st of January 2011. That coming on top of the pay freeze, the real cuts I mentioned earlier for public sector workers whose pensions will no longer be linked to the retail price index, but to the much less reflective and accurate consumer price index. And we have yet to get the report from the new Labour collaborator John Hutton in the autumn about the future of public sector pension schemes. We anticipate at the very least there will be a significant increase in the contribution demanded from us employees. The vast majority of us already pay more than 6.5% of our monthly salaries towards the local government pension scheme. In the NHS, the average pension is £6,000 a year in retirement. In local government, it's even lower, £4,000 a year. The multi-millionaire, Oxbridge and public school educated Nick Clegg is a goal to tell us that our pensions are gold-plated. Well, compare those pensions to those of members of Parliament. Compare those pensions to those private sector bosses, and in fact, a section of the bloated public sector bureaucracy whose pensions total in 6 figures per year. Think about that, and you can see that this government is now embarking on class warfare against the poorest in this society and against the public sector workforce in particular. Now, I've said enough for the time being. I'd like to hear from community and other trade union representatives who are here tonight, and certainly I'd be very glad to hear from Labour Party councillors, because we very much want them to be allies in this struggle rather than fighting them. We see the potential for a united front of resistance to the condemned coalition's cuts. But at the end of the day, we are prepared as trade unionists and members of the community to stand on our own and fight against these job losses, against the pay freezes, against the threat to our pensions, and of course the threat to the very services that many members of the community rely upon.